Hello, in this video, we will take a look at creating a VM image for Azure Marketplace virtual machine offer using Packer with its VHD destination. So first, let's take a look at what is a virtual machine offer in Azure Marketplace and what components are required to publish one. I'll break the videos into few separate ones. In the early videos, we will take a look at using Packer and creating the VHD image. And then later videos, we'll see how to actually create the offer definition, publish it, and test the result. So let's take a look what VM offer is and what components will we need. So on the Azure Marketplace documentation, looking at the offer types, we see that Azure Virtual Machine, this is the virtual machine offer, is something that allows you to publish a VM image into the marketplace, and the customers can deploy those VMs. Individual virtual machines can be deployed from here, not a template that deploys multiple virtual machines together. Those are different. Those would be under the Azure application and other offer types. So what do we need when we build a VM offer? So this is the official documentation, which you obviously will want to take a look, but these videos are meant as a way to jumpstart and to make it easier for you to follow the documentation, which may cover the specifics. But the idea is we will first need to create a virtual hard disk called the VHD uh, for the OS disk of the offer of the VM that we want to create, and that's what we will focus on first. And then that offer gets published inside of Partner Center. And once it is there, it is available to other people to deploy from the marketplace user experience or from templates and programmatically by referencing that offer. An offer will consist of three components. And the three components that we should think about in the offer are as following. There is a Azure Marketplace, and inside of a marketplace, you are a publisher, or I am a publisher. I'm publishing multiple offers. So you can see the blue boxes are offers 1, 2, 3, separate ones that I have. Each offer has a hierarchy of what's called the plan or a SKU. Sometimes it's referred to by a plan name, sometimes referred to by a SKU name, but basically SKU and plan are referring to the same thing. So a publisher has one or more offers, virtual machine offers, and then each offer is made up of a plan. Inside of a plan, there are versions. So let's say this is version 001, this is version 1001, and I can add more versions for each image. So at the end of the day, when I want to create a virtual machine, I need to refer to the following pieces of information. I will need the publisher, I will need the offer, I will need the plan, and I will need the version. And when we look at commands like AZ VM image list all publishers, Cisco, for example, we can see that the publisher with name Cisco has the following offers in the marketplace, and you can see this name is repeating. That's because these SKUs or these plans are different, and then these are the versions of each plan. So that's the concept that we'll need to keep in mind. We'll need to define our SKU or plan ID, our offer ID, and the publisher name is given to us by the Partner Center. We'll revisit it when we look at publishing the offer, but that is what we need. And then each of these versions is represented by a VHD file for the OS disk that we need to create, installing our software, configuring that VHD or that machine with everything that we need, and then capturing it, generalizing it, and publishing it. So in the first video, we will focus on how to create this specific VHD. So if we come back to the documentation, we will see that we need what we need to create a VM offer. And then in the section called Create VM Technical Assets is where it describes how to do it. So we're going to be creating a VM from an approved image. So we will, let's say, use a Windows or a Linux image. In our case, we'll use both. And then we will learn about how to test that image. Here it shows a very long page describing how to test it with a template. I'll show you a simpler way to do the testing. And then we will need to grab the most important, what we want to do at the end is grab the SAS URL or shared access signature URL for the image, because today in the marketplace, when we publish offers in the marketplace, we need to refer to them in that portal using their SaaS URL with a specific expiration date and start date. And this is what we will need to grab for our image. And when we publish it, we will show exactly how it looks inside of the marketplace, where the publishing portal, where that gets placed. Okay, and we'll need to run some certification tool. All of this sounds complex, but it's actually much simpler than that. And as we look through the videos, we will see the steps to do that. So as we're looking at this listing of VM images, let's take a look how it looks in the Azure Marketplace UI, just so we can see how everything corresponds to each other. So here we run command AZ VM image list, all publisher Cisco, and let's see how that looks if we run it through the command line. So I'm running the Azure VM image list publisher Cisco, and you can see all of the different offers, and I find the Cisco SR 1000V, and you can see all of the offers, right? For this offer, there's one SKU and there's two versions of the SKU. And if I look it up in the marketplace and the offer is visible to me, you can see I found the offer, I can see the plans and pricing. These are the SKUs, and here are all of the different SKUs that are available, right, with their titles and descriptions. So that's how it all comes together from that perspective. Not every offer needs to be visible. You'll learn about that later, that some of them can be hidden, so I will not be able to find it here, but I can still find it through the VM image list. So our next step is to understand how we're going to build the image. There are multiple ways to create an image in Azure from a VM, right? One approach is we could go to the Azure portal, we could say create a resource, and we could deploy, let's say, Ubuntu VM, start from the base image. We could SSH into the VM, install all kinds of applications on it manually through running the SSH commands, and then generalize that VM and make an image out of it. That's all great, but it's hard to repeat, and it's easy to make mistakes. I will need to deploy VM, I need to SSH into it. So what is commonly used is a tool by HashiCorp called Packer, which allows me to create a template that will create my virtual machine, and that will also go through and install everything that I need on it using scripts that I can put inside of the template. And then it can actually capture the image for me into the VHD. So that's the approach we're going to take a look at today. Just FYI, in the future, there is what's called a preview version of the Azure Image Builder service. It's not yet GA. It may be GA in the near future, so maybe by the time you watch this, it is already GA. But it is very similar to Packer. You can see you create a template, you submit the template, and the template is Packer compliant, and it does the building for you. The difference being that instead of installing Packer locally, this will do it in the cloud. But again, installing Packer locally is very easy, and that's what we will do today. So how to use Packer? We have two documents in our documentation. One for virtual machines on Linux, build images with Packer. So this document, we're not going to go through the document, but we're going to kind of see how to do the same thing. This is how to do it with Packer for Linux. And we have a separate document how to create images with Packer for Windows, and we will take a look at the difference. The main point being we will need to install Packer. So what we'll have is I've created a little repo under this GitHub repository called Azure VM Offer Hello World 2020 December. And in there, we're going to take it two ways of creating the Azure image, okay? One way we're going to look at first is using Packer and its VHD destination. And basically, the way it will work is we will use a source image of Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. We'll run Packer on my machine, just a executable that we will download from HashiCorp. That Packer will create a temporary Azure virtual machine automatically based on the template we have. And then based on the template that we will have, it execute the script on that virtual machine. And once that script is finished, it will turn off the virtual machine and it will generalize the virtual machine to create an image, because we're going to use the quote unquote deprecated VHD capability, it will give us a warning saying, oh, it's deprecated, it's VHD. Use managed images instead. I'll explain why we're going to still use the VHD today. In Azure Storage, it will, in this account that we will have, it will inside of system folder, it will have some other folder names, and they will give a name, something.vhd. And this is what we will need then for publishing in the marketplace using that SaaS URL. Okay. And then what we will do is we will create a managed image out of this VHD and create a test VM to run our tests against that VM very easily. Okay, so if we come to this repo and we open up the VHD destination, what it will tell us to do, it's very, very simple, and we'll walk line by line. We'll download the Packer binary, okay, and then we'll review the Packer templates, Packer for building Ubuntu, Packer for building CentOS and Windows, just including those examples there. We'll set some environment variables because the Packer templates will use them, the Azure subscription, our Azure Active Directory tenant, and then we'll create a client ID and a client secret for our Packer identity that we'll use to be able to create VM, delete VM, etc. How do I know what to do? In this document, you can see a way to create that identity using create for RBAC, but we will follow a slightly different example. I want to show you step by step. So let's go right into that. So let's go create ourselves an app identity that we will use for this Packer exercise. So I'm going to create an app registration really quickly, register an application. I'm going to call it AV Packer 1. It's going to be just in my tenant. I'm going to give it a unique name, localhost AV Packer 1. So this is going to be kind of its username and password in a second. And I'm going to delete this app. So passwords I'm going to keep on the screen so that way it's easier for you to follow. We're going to create a new client secret, secret 1. We'll make it valid for 1 year. We'll copy this value. Again, usually I wouldn't show these on the screen, but because we are going to be using it temporarily only, I will show you. So I created creds private.md in my repo that I cloned, just this private MD, not to check it in back into the repo. So this is my client secret. Okay, and then we just need to grab, this is my subscription that I already grabbed, and that is my tenant ID. How do I know my tenant ID? It's available right here. And we also need this client ID. So this is how we create ourselves a application that we'll use for authentication. The only other thing we need to do is we need to go to the subscription that we'll be using. So this is my subscription, and I need to make sure that this application has access to my subscription. So I'm just going to give it a contributor access, AV Packer 1. So now that we have these secrets created, we'll set them inside of the environment variable so we can continue using them, and we'll close this. So we're going to go back to the repo and basically take a look at creating. So we're focusing on the Packer, the VHD destination. So it's this file, and let me open it up in an easier to read form right here. So we basically downloaded the Packer from the download site of Packer website right here. I downloaded it. I put it in a directory where I can now run Packer. I added it to my path. It's just a big executable, Golang executable, and I put it in a folder that is in my path. Okay, so we have that. And then let's take a look at the template that we are going to use, right? We just did this part, VHD Ubuntu JSON, right? So what does that look like? So VHD Ubuntu JSON from the repo looks as follows. So this is a very simple Packer template. You can make much more complicated ones. So I'm defining over here a set of variables, and I am saying grab the subscription ID variable from the environment called subscription ID, tenant ID, tenant ID, client ID, client ID. That's why we set those in the environment, so I don't have to specify them. And a few other variables such as location, default value is TS2, storage resource group empty, storage account empty. And I'm saying that the sensitive variable is the client secret, so it doesn't log it out every time. Then in Packer, there is a section called builders, right? So there is a section called variables and builders. And I'm saying I'm going to be building VM using type Azure Resource Manager. And these are the different parameters that this builder requires. It's in the Packer documentation. And it's also, again, just to make sure everything makes sense, it's also where you can see it right here in our documentation too, but specifically in the Packer provisioner. So right here is documentation of the Packer provisioner, where it's pretty long document describing all kinds of properties. I'm going to just focus on a few. Okay, so we're gonna set the subscription from the variable, the tenant client secret, great. Then we're gonna say it's a Linux VM, perfect. Then we're going to say what image are we basing it on? So we're going to base it on this base image called from canonical publisher, offer Ubuntu server, SKU, and the latest version. We're going to say create our virtual machine in this location. Use this virtual machine size. So if we needed a bigger VM because we're doing a lot of installation and it needs quite a lot of power, I could use larger one. Instead of letting Packer create a resource group of its any name it wants, I would like it to use packer.rg for this temporary resource group where it will put the VM. For the VM, it will create, I want it to be called Packer VM. I want it to have a public IP. I'm not passing it any custom data. I'm telling it to give it, enough time to get created. And now this is the key part for the VHD destination. What I'm telling to this builder is that once we capture the image, I want the image to be placed in the storage account with this name, storage account. You see, it's not passed here by default. It's in the variables, but it's empty. We'll see how to pass it. I wanted to put in a container called Packer, and I want to prefix the VHD with Ubuntu 18.04, so I know if I put multiple VHDs there, which one belongs to what. Okay, so this is defining which virtual machine size, location, name to use, but it's all temporary because it's going to delete that virtual machine after creation. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually using a section called provisioners, which is again a very common section in all Packer scripts. And inside of it, I'm using a shell script. And I'm putting these two lines there because that's the recommendation for Packer to run shell properly. So the way the way it runs these shell commands. And what I'm doing in my script is extremely simple. I'm saying start up a new VM, SSH into the VM using the shell provisioner. That's what the shell provisioner does. Run an update on that VM, upgrade of the operating system, install what I need, Nginx in my case, create some folder, put some data in a folder, and then very importantly, what I'm doing right over here is I am telling to Packer to execute this script. W agent is the Windows Azure agent that's in the base image, right? In this image, there's already a Windows agent, and I'm telling it to deprovision or sysprep itself and clear history and sync. So this history is removed. Why am I clearing history? Because if I'm publishing an image in a marketplace, I don't want the history of everything I did over here, all of these commands. There could be many, many scripts, right? I could put multiple shell provisioners that could download complex scripts to install. That is where all of the automation happens, installing, configuring, doing whatever needs to be done. This is something that you develop manually, and once you have the script working, you put it here. And this command will clear all of that history and will also remove the SSH credentials and the users that got created, etc. Again, how do I know I need to put this here? In the documentation, we can see this example is given directly right here. And this is also what's required for creating what's called generalized Azure virtual machine images. And it explains here the difference between a deprovision plus user or plus user that removes all of the user accounts, because usually you don't want any user accounts there. And then we will execute this using Packer. Okay, so let's take a look at our script. So this is what we did. We configured this template and this script. Okay, so next, let's create a new storage account for the VHD or use an existing storage. Because we don't have a storage account for VHD, I had one, I deleted it. Let's create one. So we're going to execute some of these commands. Right now, I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code and walk through these commands. Let's execute them so that we get a storage account where the images will be. So I'm going to the README, Packer VHD, and we are right now in this section, create a new Azure storage account. So let's create a resource group. So this command will create a resource group for our VHD storage account, and this command will create the storage account. So the command to create the storage account succeeded. We got ourselves a storage account. I have a storage explorer here. So let me just refresh my list of storage accounts and see if we see it. Azure VHD storage in my subscription. And we can see there's probably not going to be any blob containers there at the moment, not yet. And we can also see the same storage account inside of my resource groups that I defined right here. Right here, just the same storage account, looking through the portal. And again, there are no containers at the moment. Why we made the storage account is because that is where our VM, the unmanaged OS disk VM, will be created by Packer, and then the VHD will land there as well. So now we can execute Packer build to create a VHD image in an existing storage account. This command will take some time to run. So we will start it and we'll talk through this for a second. So we switch into the right directory and run this command again. Okay, so what this command is doing right now, it's running the builder. It's using the credentials that we set in the environment variables. And notice there is this warning that I said will happen. You're using a Packer builder to create VHDs, which is being deprecated. Consider using managed images. In this separate video, I will record to show you how to use Packer to create images in a shared image gallery, which kind of creates managed image first. Why are we doing something with a deprecated command? Because today, Marketplace, Azure Marketplace, requires, for publishing, it requires a VHD, okay, unmanaged VHDs. In the future, it will change and it will support shared image gallery too. So that's why we'll record a separate video of how to use Packer to create shared image gallery. However, today, because you're watching this video, maybe at the time when it's not yet available, and for programmatic API access, you will still need the VHD. So I'm showing you how to create the VHD, and I'm using the Packer VHD destination. And that is why that message is appearing, and that is okay. We're doing that on purpose. So it created a resource group, and it's created a deployment name, and it's deploying a VM. So let's go inside of the portal and do a quick look around of what is happening. So resource groups, and if you remember, we called the resource group Packer, and you can see created VM, public IP, network card, the virtual network. It's all kind of self-enclosed, and it will get deleted, and it succeeded already, as you can see, pretty fast. And if we look here, in a few moments after it succeeds, it will run those commands on the VM that we define in the template. So again, these commands to do apt-get, install, nginx, create folders, it will run them soon. And then what it will do, okay, so right here it's getting the public IP address and it's provisioning that shell script, it's running the app update, and it will take some time. But in the meantime, let's explore a little more. So we right now, if we're looking at what Packer is doing, it's created a folder called images, and this is where our VHD of the OS disk list, busy right now, is sitting. Why is it called list? Is because if we look at the storage account from portal, we can see what is it leased by. This images container got created by Packer, and it's leased by the virtual machine that that we are using right now. So this is leased by the virtual machine right here. You can see Packer VM is the virtual machine metadata property. So this is not our image, okay? This is the running VM. When it creates an image, it will create another container, and we'll see another container here called system. And inside of that container system, we will find our image. So we're close, but we're not there. So we just did these two parts. We're executing the Packer build. And once the Packer build is finished, we can easily create our shared access signature using the CLI command over here, basically saying, point it to a storage account, get the read and list permissions, starting a few days before today and ending at least a month after today. So this date is kind of too soon even for today. And this would be appropriate later for publishing into the marketplace. But we'll skip that till the next video. Instead, we will focus on this test. So let's see where we are at. So at this moment, it already created our VM and it's capturing it. You can see that these few commands right here are from that deprovision plus user command right over here. This is what is causing this to happen right here. This is running and it's deleting. So once it is all done, we will get our image. So we are seeing powering off the virtual machine. So it should be stopped right now, and then capturing the image is happening right now, and then deletion will happen. So looking at the portal, we see this virtual machine is stopped as we expected, and the image is being created. So if we look in the Storage Explorer and refresh our containers, we may actually already see the system and these little subfoldery things. And right here is our image URL. That's the prefix. It appends this GUID name at the end, but this is that prefix we specified inside of the template right over here for the capture name prefix. And then what it's doing right now, it's removing the deployment and cleaning up the resource group. That takes a few minutes. So this is why Packer is super powerful. You know, we can encapsulate creation of an image in this simple template. So now let's take a look, how would we generate the SaaS signature for that if we needed to publish it in a partner center, as we will need later. So we will basically say, let's run this command. So this command is available already in the README file right over here. Let's just change this to be more interesting, something like that. And we basically say create a SaaS container on this account name, generate SaaS on the system container. Okay, these are the required permissions for Marketplace. Documentation includes it. So let's make a new terminal window and run this command. Even though the other command is still running, that's fine. So we got ourselves the SaaS signature that we need. And as documentation says, append the SaaS token to the end of the URL. So basically, we would append it here, and we'll see how that works later when we actually need to publish. So if I include this, let's put it inside of our creds private file. That's our signature. And then we'll still need the base URL. And with the base URL, we can grab from multiple places. Either Packer output will appear here, or we can even see it just right here. So just basically say copy URL. And this copy URL goes and we prepend this, right? So now combining this together will give us a usable SaaS signature that Partner Center would like. We can double check that it actually works and then cancel the download. We don't want to download 30 gigs, but that's downloading our image. I'll just cancel it out. Okay, so we got ourselves the download going there. Now let's figure out what are the next steps. How do we know that this virtual machine actually includes what we expect it to include? We need to do a quick test of that VM, and we need to run a certification tool for that VM. That's documented here, testing a virtual machine image. So if I open up this document, we can download this certification tool. Okay, and I have the certification tool installed on my machine, so we'll test it with that tool. Or if you don't want to use a tool, There's also an article, a blog post I wrote a while back that describes how to use that tool, and there's a video walking through using that tool, but also using test APIs, etc. If you want to kind of call an API that connects to the virtual machine and test that it complies with Marketplace. But let's go step by step. So we're going to create a test VM from the VHD image. We're going to create ourselves a group. So let's go back and create ourselves a group. So we'll create AV test VM 100 resource group. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, let's create a managed image from the VHD that Packer just generated, right? So this is our VHD that Packer generated. So I need to take this part of the URL that I copied from Packer generation, stick it here. I'm telling create me a Ubuntu image from that. So it's a managed image. So we had Packer create a VHD. We are creating a managed image out of that VHD. And where we will see it is in the resource group called test VM. In here, once that image, the command just finished running and we see the Ubuntu image is created. So that is that image. And if we look at that image, each source will be that VHD. So we are kind of going backwards, right? We create a VHD to test it. It's easier to test it using a managed image. And then we are going to create a VM with a public IP. So we're going to say this is the VM, that's its name, use this image and use this simplistic password. So I'm going to deploy this command and pause this video while it's creating. It takes a few minutes. So virtual machine got created. And now if we connect to that virtual machine using SSH, we can see if it contains the things we expect it to contain. So we got logged in with the password. If we list the directories, we can see my custom folder, that part of our preparation script needed, right? If you remember. And inside of my custom folder, there will be a file. And inside of that file, there will be data. And let's see if this virtual machine actually works from perspective of Nginx. So we just take this URL. And because it's not going to pull up right now because there is a security group on the virtual machine only allowing SSH. But if we do a command inside of curl, we can see that Nginx is running on that virtual machine. And the reason this fails is because we would need to open a port. And I didn't open the port. So basically inside of this resource group, there is a virtual machine and this NSG does not have the port open. And if we open the port, we'll be able to test. Right now it's only port 22 by default because the test command that we're using creates a virtual machine simplistically like that. And now we can run the certification tool against this virtual machine. So if we run the certification tool that's installed, again from that link, or the other command, we would say start test, my test one, password authentication, IP address of the VM. We'll just try this real quick. Username, Azure user, password at 123, connect. It says connected successfully. Next. Now it starts running some of these tests. This will take a few minutes to run. So it took a couple minutes to run, and this shows all green And just warning saying just double check these things, but this means that it will likely pass certification, at least the minimum static analysis are part of certification of having the right versions, having the latest stuff, and you can answer this um, self-questionnaire just to make sure that everything else in the VM is okay and save it. But we're not looking into this testing tool too much right now. The main thing is that's why we deployed a test VM to be able to confirm that it actually works. What we can do next is we can kick off a deletion of the test VM because we don't need it anymore. Okay, and at the same time, just let's recap what we have. We have ourselves now a URL to a disk, VHD, from which we created a managed disk to test the VM, and it seemed to be perfect. Now we could use this to publish in Marketplace, and we generated it with a specific shared access signature container level SaaS. If we scroll up a tiny bit here, when um, Packer finished, it went and it deleted the VM, and it actually gave us the URL of the OS disk right here. That was the URL, which I found by going here. You can also get it right from Packer. But note, important, we cannot use this shared access signature URL, the read-only one for Marketplace, because Marketplace wants a very specific SaaS. It is documented here, and SaaS failure messages could be described, right? For example, start and end date are incorrect, or it's not container level, etc. So what we generated, get shared access signature, we used what Marketplace needs, okay? And this is basically an overview in brief of creating an Azure VM image with Packer at VHD destination. We'll have a link to this repo together with the video. And two final things to note is we looked at Ubuntu, but in the repo, we also include two more examples for VHD, one for CentOS, and you can see the reason it's interesting to take a look at is we created from a different base image, right? Instead of canonical, we use CentOS, and also we put in a different prefix, and you can see that the commands that we run on it, right, are kind of slightly different because instead of apt, we're using yum, but the other things are very similar, right? Same kind of deprovisioning. So that's Linux example. And a Windows example is also included. Here we are starting from a Windows server with OS type Windows, okay? And then instead of using right here an SSH type of commands, here we need to add that we are using WinRM communicator to communicate with it afterwards. And over here, the prefix is different. And you can see it installs a web server, checks for it to be running, that checks for the agent to be running, create a folder, put some hello in there. This is very important. Running the sysprep to generalize it quiet without UI. And then what it's doing is it's polling for that generalization to enter a state called image state generalized serial to OB out of the box experience, and then it breaks and exits. So this may take a few minutes for Windows to generalize. Again, how do we know these commands? Not to rely on this repo only is to look at the documentation. You can see these commands are right there and everything. Then we'll be able to create ourselves a Windows image. And I will create that separately so that way we can, when we publish our VMs, we'll be able to publish a VM with three things, a Ubuntu, a CentOS, and a Windows plans, right? So just to show how those commands would be executed, if I scroll up here, instead, so right here, we're not going to cancel that, let it continue deleting, but let's clear this window and say, okay, let's kick off the Windows deployment. So basically we're just using the Windows template in the same storage account. And in one more window later, after that is done, we'll be able to generate the, again, switching folders. Run the command. Looks like over here I did not set the environment variables correctly, so let's just check it again. So that the reason, it's easy to hit this error. So basically because it requires this to be in the environment variables, if I run this command, that's the type of error you will get. It couldn't authenticate and grab. Now it's creating my Windows virtual machine and it's generalizing. So at the end, we will have inside of the storage account 3, Ubuntu, CentOS, and Windows. And we'll be able to use them when we publish to Marketplace. Thank you for watching this video. Another video will be about how to create Packer with shared image gallery, and the final video about how to actually publish the virtual machine in the partner center and how to test it from there. Thank you.